Thanks for the good information. I I have kind of a different theory, and let me see if I can kind of help explain it. Usually NavMesh corruption, when you have I'm just going to go based on just from what I know about corrupted tables and corrupted lists. When you have a bunch of objects that are linked together, you have I'm kind of doing this in my mind on the fly. So if you have a bunch of objects linked together, if you have a gap in those objects, now to me, I'm thinking visually, right? You're thinking like I'm thinking like a 2D image where you have a road, just a road, or just take a paint program, you draw a line, you break that line. If you're following those pixels, let's say you scan that image and you find a particular colored pixel, let's say red, and then you're looking for the direction that pixel is going. You're going up, down, left, and right. You're pathing on this 2D image. It's a very slow process, but you're pathing on this 2D image. And if you cannot go any further, then you have a break in that 2D image. But that doesn't look at the triangles, all the data triangles that are connected together. So let's say you have a point. They call it like a linked list. So let's say you have a data structure and you have a previous point, you have the current point, and then you have the next point. So imagine each point at the very least takes up three different values. So let's say you put the very first point on the map. There is no previous point, so that's going to be 0 or a null reference. The current point is the XY position of that point, or in 3D, the XYZ position. And then the next point is null because there's no additional point. So if you make a second point, then that first point's data structure, the previous is still 0 because that's the first point. The current point is where it's at, in 3D space. The next points to the structure of the next point that you just put down. That point's previous points back to the first. That point's current is its current XYZ position, and its next is 0. That's called a linked list. It's where one object links to another. And if that's broken, then let's say, for example, that an object gets deleted, a triangle gets deleted or changes, and you already have a list of these, that you have this linked list in memory. So it's pointing to a second object that's no longer there because remember, you're not checking in real time. You've built the list up, prior to doing all your processing. So as you've built your list up, all of a sudden the nav mesh changes. So now that triangle no longer exists. It's been cut out of the nav mesh. So now you're pointing to a point on that nav mesh of that triangle that doesn't exist. So you still have a memory value, but when you go to access that memory value, the data there is invalid because it's more than likely been sent to the garbage collector or it's been freed from memory. So that's what I think that is. It's either something was deleted or added improperly. That would be your corrupted nav mesh. Now, here's what I'm think is happening. I have those crashes randomly. Okay, so prior to SS2, I was using rebuild all-in-one, which rebuilds the precombines, and I was using transfer settlements. Now, I'm not looking at transfer settlements as a solution per se. I'm looking at it as simply a mod that allows me to create, save, and load settlements. That's really what this is. SS2 does the same thing. Transfer, except it has a lot more game mechanics built onto it. Transfer settlements is much lighter. It's a much, much lighter application. It doesn't have all of the weight and the mechanics and the scripting built on top of that. Okay, so if I'm going to test a load on a papyrus, or I'm going to test a build, let's say a load order build. Now, this is outstanding invalid data and all the things that we know, we all know can cause problems. So we're testing kind of the engine, we're testing the data engine, but mostly the engine. So transfer settlements is the likely choice at this point because it gives me a minimum load test of putting objects in the environment. It can put a ton, but as far as scripting goes and all that, there's nothing built on top of it. All in one basically redoes settlements, and it allows you to build objects up when you have the resources to do so. It worked just fine. Everything worked fine. And it actually rebuilds the precombines. So it doesn't break precombines because it has its own. So at that time, I was using rebuild all in one in settlements, and I was using transfer settlements. And for some reason, when there was a settlement attack, now it was in the it happened even with vertibirds in the air, and then it happened again on the ground. I would get a crash. I think I made videos of that in Red Rocket where I'm standing up on top of the Red Rocket building in Starlight Drive-In. Uh, Correct, that was Starlight Drive-In. I don't think it was Red Rocket there by Sanctuary. I believe it's Starlight was the only one I had. So I was standing on top of that, and if I stood just out of the way, I would get a NavMesh crash. It wouldn't happen immediately, but I think once I drew enough attention to myself and they tried to path up to me, it was the problem. Now, I didn't really test it a lot running or, making sure I stayed on the ground, and just see if they were having a problem getting up there. There was a crash there. In Sanctuary, there was a vertibird crash. I noticed that. I don't remember if there was any on the ground, but there was a vertibird crash flying around the air. But, and so I thought, okay, well, maybe it's transfer settlements issue. So, or maybe it's how I did things. It could very well be plugins and stuff like that. But I was thinking, okay, wait a minute. This is random. So it's not bad data because it's the same data. It's the exact same data every time. Rebuild all in one uses the same data. So it can't be that. So there's something random happening. So I thought, okay, let me do this again. So I went ahead and thought maybe it was the order in which I did things. In other words, if you clear something out or you swap things around, because a lot of times when I'm playing games, I will add mods. I do occasionally remove them. That can cause problems. So I thought, okay, let me start over fresh. So I started over, same exact load order, started over fresh, didn't have problems with them attacking settlements. So when and I actually would kite them in to these locations. I didn't have any problems. Even standing on top of Red Rocket and Starlight Drive-In, I didn't have those problems. So I thought, okay, cool. Everything's good. We're stabilizing out. I do have a classic holstered weapons crash, but it is random. It is completely random. Same people, same weapons. It's just, same people, same weapons, but it's just sometimes when I load into Sanctuary or other places, there will be a crash. And that mod author is looking at that because other people are reporting that issue. So, and again, I think it's when things are occurring, when that cell loads. So I thought, okay, I'm going to test out SS2, and as you saw, or if you happen to follow the trail there, everything was going fine up to a certain point. I think what's happening is I think that workshop framework is getting flooded. I think the functions are. I haven't looked at the functions, but I'm going to go on like the assertion that the functions are okay. So remember, now I'm looking at this objectively. I look at everything objectively. So I'm going to go on and that's really a bad assertion to make when you're analyzing something to literally assume. Let me check this. To literally assume everything is rocking okay, because there's always that possibility. So on that assertion that workshop framework does what it does, it's getting slammed. So if you have multi-threading going on, I don't know how well instanced variables are. So you have reentrant. It could be a reentrant problem. See, okay, think about this. Think with scripting. And I was thinking about this over the course of, like a day or two when I was working on some new templates, some new programming templates, which you're kind of seeing right here. Okay, let's say that you have a scripting language and variables are specific to scripts. How would you share a script between multiple objects? Each object would get its own instance of that script. So the way that you would have an instance variable is you would have multiple scripts running with their own instances. Otherwise, you would have to use existing references. So let's say the player reference or an NPC reference. So you couldn't have any instance variables. You would merely have to use the scripting language to check for specific references that the game engine is keeping track of. So I kept thinking, okay, what happens if you have shared scripts? If you have one script that's running and somehow there's shared script or shared data, well, then you can have you can have a threading issue because anybody who's ever done it, multi-threading is a pain, and it's what they call a PETA. It's a pain in the arse because you can't always you really don't know what order things are going to get executed in. So, your mind has a tendency to a person's mind lays things out sequentially because that's how we solve problems. You have to get step one in order to get step two. Even if you think ahead for step five, you still have to go through step one, step two, and step three. So we have a tendency to think sequentially. So when we code or when we translate things, we usually translate them sequentially. And that means that they may not always be firing in that sequential order. So let me go back to the data. So transfer settlements plus all-in-one crash. However, I think I've had NavMesh crashes before. I'd have to go back and really look at the data. I've got the buff out logs backed up. They're backed off. I'd have to locate them again because if you start going back like a year or 2 years, I think you're gonna find out that I wasn't using all in one then. I think I was using transfer settlements. So you think, transfer settlements, that's the culprit. But I didn't use transfer settlements. It's in my load order, but I haven't used it to import or export any objects. So then I switched over to transfer settlements and Valence's deep clean and remodel. He changes nav meshes. He fixes the nav meshes in some of the areas. I didn't have a crash. And this was more than one load order because I did multiple tests with different load orders. Because I would add mods, take mods away, the load order would become unstable. So I would literally start a new game, a new test with that current load order. Unless there were plugins that I suspected of causing a problem or what I think, and then those I just temporarily disabled it. So using transfer settlement and valances, I didn't have a problem. There's no crashes. Over in Red Rocket, I always stood on top of the Red Rocket canopy, the overhanging canopy, and I would literally shoot stuff under the bridge, if you know what I'm talking about, which leads over to the quarry. There's always stuff spawning there, and it would kite into the settlement, never had a crash. And I had a ton of enemies one time. Like it was there were scores of them. They were everywhere. Never had a crash. When I added more enemies, there was a ton more. Never had a crash. So I thought, okay, good, we're solid. Now I switch over to Sim Settlements 2. Now again, Sim Settlements 2 places objects in a settlement. It goes through a process to place objects. Whether it's through a script or not doesn't matter. It places objects in a settlement. So you have a commonality between two mods that place objects. Everything seemed to work fine. Everything seemed to work just fine. I mean, there were quite a few playthroughs I had, absolutely no issues. And we're talking hour pop, easy. I even had times that I recorded more. I mean, I actually had more game time that I didn't record in times when I thought I was recording and I didn't. Fine, no problems. I mean, other than, whatever quirks were actually happening with some settlements at the moment, you know, then no, there were no real issues. But then I had a group of raiders spawn just outside of Red Rocket. Everything seemed to go fine until some dude starts firing a minigun or until I ran around the building. But once I ran around the building, the minigun went off and there's a pause right there. You can see it in the video. There's a pause. Once it paused, something was readjusting. Something was making an adjustment. And that would happen a lot because I had noticed, I think in other videos, as I was running past Red Rocket, I said, wait, there's a pause. Because when I went to get the settlers and brought them back up, there was a pause right there. Right when I went past Red Rocket, I thought, okay, what is that? As I'm walking past the Red Rocket near Sanctuary, there's like a 1-second pause where there's some kind of processing going on. Not really sure what was up with that because there was nothing and remember, this is a Sim Settlement 2 playthrough. There's nothing in Sanctuary. There's nothing in Red Rocket. The only thing I did was acquire the settlement, and then I use Raise to just completely eliminate the objects. And of course, that goes through Workshop Framework, I believe, in order to delete the objects. Could be mistaken, but I believe that's what that does. So anyways, I had a crash there. Okay, that was, so I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I haven't seen one of these in quite a few playthroughs. Now it's back. Same load order, same everything, including transfer settlements in there. But remember, I didn't use it to import or export anything. It's just there. And now we're back to NavMesh crash. And then there's other people that's also reporting NavMesh crashes during a conflict. So how I resolved it is I knew it was going to crash in that one area. So what I did is I just simply did a KAH and killed all the enemies, and then we're good. So I'm not really sure what it is. So to kind of summarize, you had rebuild all in one affecting a settlement, and then you had raise affecting the objects in a settlement through workshop framework, and then you had transfer settlements. There's a time when there was a problem. I didn't have a problem anymore. So then now I have, and then I added, instead of rebuild all in one, I had balances, transfer settlement, raise, no problem. Absolutely no problem. So now I go back. So now I change it, and that's multiple playthroughs. And I go back to Sim. So I change it to Sim Settlements. All I did is add it. I think if you go back and look at that time, all I did was add Sim Settlements in. I think it's that. Don't know if I made a patch or not. And that would be the first thing a person would think of as a patch. But these combat crashes, I had without even using these nav mesh crashes. I had without even using Sim Settlements too. So to suspect it's particularly a compatibility crash, I doubt it. I could see where that could be it, but I doubt it. So we're at Sim Settlements 2. We got Raise in there. And then, of course, we have Transfer Settlements that we're not using. Okay. And then we pick up a nav mesh crash again. So I put all that playthrough on hold, started a new one, dropped Sim Settlements 2 out of the mix, and I'm going back to Transfer Settlements. And then we're going to spawn a ton of people and see if I can generate a nav mesh crash in those areas. So to kind of summarize all of this concept, what I think is happening, everyone, I would do the same thing. So this is not kind of a weighted statement. I would do the same thing. Everyone, they program based on events. When's the best time to do something? Well, on load. That's when the cell loads. So I don't know if on load means that the cell has completely loaded or it's in the process of loading. And let me explain that. So you can have data that is always available, but not yet pre-calculated or recalculated. You can have pre-calculated data, like XYZ positions of the player as an example. That's already known. That won't change until you move. So there's data that won't change. However, there's data that has to be recalculated or built, such as dynamic nav meshes, right? So you have the settlement, you have the original nav mesh, and now you have all the objects in it. So it has to quickly stitch together a dynamic nav mesh. And what I'm thinking is happening is there's too much coming in too soon because everything is doing it on load. Everyone does that. So I don't know if there's anybody actually times it. So say, okay, on it. Because, everybody wants that, using the scripting engine, everybody wants that immediate response, that this response has to happen right now. This is real time. We're talking real time. So all this is slamming in at once. And I think that in the background, things are being rebuilt. So let me show you where I'm kind of getting this idea from. If you've ever used transfer settlements, as soon as that settlement imports, as soon as it imports, a message comes up that says travel away, don't build anything, don't delete, once it's imported, don't build anything, don't delete anything, travel away, let whatever the game engine is going to do to rebuild and whatever it does its background tasks, travel away, then come back so that cell reloads. I actually didn't listen. I actually didn't pay attention to that one time when I was playing. I just dropped the settlement. I just dropped it. And I actually did it twice. I imported a settlement, then I immediately went and deleted a couple objects, and all of a sudden, within just a couple seconds, crash, instant CTD. So the scripts that we're running, were not done with the objects that it had loaded prior to me deleting it. So he wanted the scripts and everything to finish and all the background tasks to finish. So because this is a random problem, what I'm thinking is happening is that there's processes going on in the background in the game engine that builds this data. It's building it up. And going into workshop mode somehow, because you can be in workshop mode when you're attacked. So I've never actually tried to do that because I have Workshop Plus in, which I'd have to turn off that it prevents me from being attacked. Something prevents me from being attacked. I believe it's Workshop Plus. So I do know that if I'm just using regular vanilla, I think I can be attacked. I don't know if they disable that or not. But I think that the game engine is trying to, it's got the cell loaded and it's working, especially if it's a complicated cell with a lot of objects. It's doing a lot of knitting and a lot of work. But things are firing off too quick and all it, because I don't think on load means that the cell is fully loaded, because I don't believe that's the case. So I think that means that whatever, I think load means that all of the data is now loaded from the files. Or let me rephrase that. I don't think on load means all the post processing is done. It simply means all the data has been loaded and now processing can continue. Because if you think about it, NPCs that are there already there. And that would explain why things fall through the floor. They would fall through. You have all that kind of weird problem. Objects fall through because objects load and post initialize at different times. So the table doesn't have clipping. A bowl on the table now falls through the table. And I think the Bethesda tried to fix this because I don't see this as bad in Fallout 4 as in Fallout 3. So that's what I think is happening. I think it's too much too quick and the background processes aren't done. That's why people are having these random crashes. You don't see them have it and all of a sudden, but once they have it, it's there. Because once you load into that cell and the NPCs are doing their thing, it's not done yet. And then once they try to navigate or do whatever it is they're doing, you've got instant problems. And it could even be a situation where something is damaged and an object is being replaced with something else. Although I wouldn't think the collision mesh would change that much. I wouldn't think it would change at all, actually. So that's what I'm working on right now. So what I can say, what I've done, I put the SS2 on hold because I've got like I said, I've got a strange crash coming out of the desk, and I can't imagine anything in there that's going to affect the desk unless it's the Sim Settlements 2 desk, unless it's IDAC. But I don't know if IDAC does that or not. I have it in there, but I'm not really using it. So I'll have to take a look and see, like, maybe I have to look in Xedit and see if there's any type of, because I can easily look to see if there's scripting files with the same name that's causing a conflict. And then I could probably use Xedit to try and see if I can isolate maybe a record conflict. But I have that kind of a crash. So, most of the stuff I have is gameplay, a few weapons, some armor, and that's about it. I do have the transfer settlements in there, like I said, but I don't use it right now. And then I have deep clean and remodel. And as far as locations go, I don't know if I have a whole lot of locations. Yeah, so I've got some workshop stuff. So I don't know if I have a lot of them. I might have a couple that affect locations, like BNS trees, things like that. But that's what I think it is because it's a random occurrence, and that's what people are seeing. So now, whether for some reason the nav meshes aren't completing, I don't know. I'm not sure about that. But I think it's an interference between a ton of scripts firing at once, grabbing data, because some of the data is grabbed through F4SE. So F4SE is linking into the game data, and it's getting whatever data is right there at that time. But that data may change if there's other background processes running. So you got a snapshot of that moment, but that moment is about ready to change. So now you're working on processing data at that moment. Then all of a sudden you realize, wow, I've just crashed because that data has actually changed. So I think it's a difference between, like if on load means everything is done, not just the data loaded, but all the post-processing on that cell is completed before that event fires. So that's what I think the issue is. So yeah, I've got another test running, but this week I've got to, I put it off until towards the end of the week. I'm working on some new templates. So I'm working on new coding templates. So this exists as an example of a coding template. It seems very specific, but it's not. It basically uses the libraries that I've written that go into this application because they're very general libraries. So I use those libraries and a template source code. So in other words, the template source code would be the form, and then I can put whatever objects I want on here, but all the event handling, like menus, all the event handling, that is in the template. So in effect, all I have to do to kind of show you what it is, all I'd have to do is go over to here because this is the actual code template right here. So all I would have to do is go over to here and, all of this is going to stay the same. So in a sense, all of this is really here to make sure that a certain workflow happens on a form. Forms, are displayed, menus work, things are displayed. Like if you notice, this list looks very similar to the list over here because it's the exact same code. And all I would have to do is I put over in here, there's a common section which has things like waiting animation. So it uses the animation functions in the reusable library to throw up the little waiting. So those all that's going to be the same. And even the functions that are designed when you, let's say, right click a menu, this is all done with queues. This is all done using the same exact queue system over here. The only difference would be, it would be this. So application specific. So what I would do is I would literally copy over this whole template and then application specific code, which I haven't really done yet. This is all the ode code. This was all quick and dirty code. So all that's going to change is all commented out. All this is going to change. So from here down, this is going to be code that is specific to this application. So once I go into the designer and I design the form, then all I have to do is go in, copy the template over, and literally I have something that's going to run out of the box. It runs out of the box. Well, there's a few simple changes, like I'm going to have to declare over here. I'm going to have to declare these. I'll have to declare the controls, such as like list views, which is over like here. See, I'm going to have to. This will change. This right here will change. Where I actually put this in the load thing. I could put this in specific. What I could do is I could move this over to the specific side of things, and then therefore it will, and probably I could do that, and therefore it's going to address specific controls such as, this list and this list, and this picture box, things like that. But the idea behind this is the templates are going to let me very, very quickly develop an application. All I need is the idea. All I really need is to define the controls, go in and design it, update the controls in the app so that, it sets things properly, make sure they're set properly, and then the application specific functions, because everything is going to be handled with, I don't have to worry about capturing events. All that is done with the queuing system. So all of that stays the same. All of that's in libraries and it's all standard. All I need to do is to process the event. So that's what I did. I moved the queue over to here and it processes it the exact same way. So, normally when you generate an event, you have the event in your code. So when you click on this, it generates an event, it's in your code, and then your code instantly responds to that event. I simply put it in an event queue, and then this program scans. It just kind of processes that event queue as events occur. And what that allows me to do is let me take any application, cram anything I want to in that event queue, whether it belongs to a form application or not. Doesn't matter. I just can cram anything in there, and then I can process it through the specific stuff. So the idea behind this is to is to greatly shorten development time for new applications. Next week, I got to move this over to command shells. I already have a template, but it's self-contained. It doesn't use the libraries. It doesn't use all of these libraries here. It doesn't use these libraries here. See all these libraries. So this one is actually using this library. So it's a shared library. Plus I had to put in more code so the library can be moved around because I don't want everything crammed in this folder over here. Let me show you real quick. I don't want everything crammed over here like this. I'm going to break this down into subfolders and it'd be a little bit easier to organize it. So, and plus there's going to be, I've got to test the option of being able to pull the library from the registry, the library location from a registry, the install folder in a sense. I need to test that out. That's going to, and it's common. It's very common in every one of these libraries. These libraries were built on a library template. So it's built on a template and everything is the same from the top down to a certain point. It's all the same. And the only thing, see, this is what I have to test. So this is this right here. This is what we're going to test here in a little bit. So I have to test this probably next week. And then I've got, well, back on the template. So the only thing you would change is the title here. These kind of declarations. It's as minimal as possible and everything else stays the same. So it's a template. And then so it helps me develop libraries quickly. It's going to help me develop forms applications quickly. And it's going to help me. So when I do the command line template, it's going to help me do those very quickly because it's going to be the same template. The same command parameters are going to exist. It keeps things consistent. So it uses the same, the command parameters for one command line application is going to be the same for another. There may be a couple that are specific to that application, but the base is going to be the same. It's going to have consistency across the board. Development time is going to decrease. And yeah, that's kind of like that's what I got to do next week. So I won't really have time to do a whole lot of play testing and things like that because I need to get this laid out so I can get some of these idea backlogs off the table and continue keep moving this whole thing forward. All right. Well, I don't want to take up anybody. I don't want to take up any more time. I know it's been in a whole lot, and it's still early in the morning. It's the weekend, so I'm gonna hop off here and get back to what I was doing. And I hope everyone has a great afternoon and evening.